Welcome to True Echo, where real courage echoes louder than power, and ordinary people become extraordinary heroes. Today's story begins in a towering boardroom in Chicago, where a 16-year-old janitor's daughter did something unthinkable. She stopped a CEO's pen mid-signature, and with a single sentence, changed the course of a billion-dollar company. The marble floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights of Harper Enterprises, polished to perfection each morning by a pair of unnoticed hands. Emma Carter's hands. She moved quietly down the 32nd floor corridor, pushing her cleaning cart as the echoes of executives' heels and distant laughter faded into silence behind office doors. Her oversized janitor's badge bounced gently against her sweatshirt. She wasn't supposed to be seen. She wasn't supposed to speak. But tonight, Emma had stayed longer than usual. Her mother, Sophia, had gone home early after feeling dizzy, leaving Emma to finish their shift alone. That's when curiosity struck. A thick, spiral-bound folder sat forgotten atop the conference table in the empty executive boardroom. It was labeled, "Merger Contract, Final Signature Required." Emma hesitated at the doorway. She knew better than to snoop. Harper Enterprises wasn't known for second chances. But something about the way the folder was left, as if someone wanted it seen yet unnoticed, piqued her. And besides, Emma wasn't just a janitor's daughter. She was a straight-A student. Self-taught in business law. Fascinated by corporate contracts and the language used to bury responsibility beneath legal jargon. She stepped forward. The conference room's massive glass walls reflected her image: hoodie, scuffed sneakers, mop cart. No place for a 16-year-old from Chicago's South Side. And yet, she moved to the head of the table, slid the folder open, and flipped to the last section. A red tab marked "Sign Here" peeked from the edge of page 22. She scanned the paragraph above it. Then reread it. And again. Her blood turned cold. Clause 14, Section C. It was buried in legalese so carefully worded that even someone trained might skim past it. But not Emma. The clause transferred all post-merger legal liability, including fraud, bankruptcy, and civil suits, solely to Harper Enterprises. If anything went wrong, the entire burden would fall on Thomas Harper's company, not on the other party, Brian Miller's firm. Brian, her mother had told her, was Thomas's most trusted partner for over a decade. Emma's chest tightened. Was this a mistake? Or something far worse? She grabbed a sticky note from the supply drawer and scribbled the clause details down. Then she hurried from the boardroom, her heart pounding. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the pen in Thomas Harper's hand hovering above the signature line, one flick of ink away from financial disaster. The question burned through her: should she say something? She was 16. A janitor's daughter. No one would believe her. Worse, her mom could be fired. They depended on this job for everything. But the next morning, as Emma stood outside the towering building beneath the rising sun, something deeper stirred inside her. A voice, her mother's voice, gentle but firm, rang in her ears: doing what's right doesn't wait for permission. It waits for courage. She clutched the note in her pocket, took a deep breath, and pushed open the front doors. Up on the top floor, the Harper Enterprises executive team was already gathering. Emma made her way toward the conference room slowly, trying to steady her breath. She could hear muffled voices: Thomas Harper's calm baritone, Karen Harper's clipped, elegant diction, and Brian Miller's unmistakable smooth tone. The glass door stood ajar. Emma paused. This was it. The moment she would either become the girl who saved the company, or the girl who lost everything. She raised her hand, and knocked. Silence. Every voice in the boardroom stopped. Heads turned. Thomas Harper looked up from the contract, confused. His pen, gold, engraved, hovered above the final page. Emma stepped into the room, her shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking but clear, but that clause is a trap. Karen Harper blinked, her mouth parting in disbelief. Brian Miller's expression turned to a slow, mocking smile. "Who is this?" he asked calmly. "The janitor's kid?" Emma's heart pounded. She ignored him and turned to Thomas, her voice steadier now. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt. But I reviewed the merger document last night. Page 22, Clause 14. If you sign it, you assume all legal liability. Anything goes wrong, it's your company on the hook, not Mr. Miller's." The room went still. A junior executive pulled the document forward. Another scrolled quickly on a tablet. Eyes darted. Pages flipped. Karen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "This is outrageous. You don't belong here. Who let her in?" But Thomas didn't speak. His eyes were fixed on Emma. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the handwritten sticky note, and placed it gently on the table. "I don't expect you to believe me," she said softly, "but you should read it before you sign." Karen rose from her chair. "Thomas, this is absurd." Brian stood as well, chuckling. "Thomas, are we really entertaining legal advice from a teenager with a mop?" But Thomas raised a hand. "Enough," he said quietly. He picked up the document. He read. Slowly. The room watched as his eyes narrowed, and the blood drained from his face. "She's right," came a voice, "Jessica, the company's legal advisor. Clause 14, shifts everything onto us." Karen froze. Brian's smile faltered. Thomas looked up, stunned. How did this get past legal? Everyone turned to look at Karen and Brian. But Thomas's eyes shifted back to Emma, this small girl who had walked into a lion's den to speak the truth. "Thank you," he said quietly. The moment was fragile. It could have turned to triumph. But then, everything unraveled. 2 security guards appeared at the door. They didn't wait for orders. They moved straight toward Emma. "You'll come with us now," one said. Emma stepped back. "Wait, what? Why?" Brian spoke before Thomas could. "She breached executive security. Entered a private meeting. We'll handle it internally." Emma turned toward Thomas, pleading silently. But he hesitated. And that moment of silence, that terrible, aching pause, was all Brian needed. The guards took Emma by the arms and led her out. She didn't resist. Not yet. Because something inside her had already changed. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The elevator ride down from the executive floor felt like a silent fall through space. Emma stood between the 2 guards, their hands firm but not cruel on her arms. Her thoughts spun wildly. The boardroom. The contract. Thomas Harper's stunned face. The look of betrayal on Karen's and Brian's expressions. She had told the truth. So why did it feel like she was the one being punished? When the elevator doors opened on the lobby, a woman from HR was already waiting. Beside her stood Emma's mother, Sophia Carter, her expression dazed with confusion and fear. "Mom." Emma's voice cracked as she stumbled toward her. Sophia looked at the guards, then at Emma, then at the HR woman. "What's going on?" "I'm afraid we have to suspend both of you pending an internal investigation," the HR representative said, her tone neutral and cold. "There was an unauthorized breach of executive proceedings this morning." Emma's breath caught. "I didn't do anything wrong, I only—" "Emma," Sophia cut her off gently, but her voice trembled. "What did you do?" "I stopped him from signing a dangerous contract," Emma said, her eyes pleading. "It would have destroyed the company, Mom. I had to speak up." Sophia's face crumpled. Not in anger, but in devastation. She wrapped an arm around her daughter, her voice hushed but strained. "Do you know what they'll do to us for this?" Emma swallowed hard. They left the Harper Enterprises building in silence, the weight of humiliation pressing on their backs like a concrete slab. The city air felt colder than usual. People passing by on the street barely noticed the two janitors leaving the pristine glass doors, two women who just lost everything. At home, their small apartment felt tighter than ever. Emma sat in the corner of their shared living room while her mother stood by the window, arms crossed, lost in thought. Finally, Sophia turned to her. "Why, Emma," she whispered. "Why didn't you just keep your head down?" Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at her hands. Then finally said, "Because if I stayed quiet, I would have been helping them lie." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "We don't have the luxury to fight lies, sweetheart. We're not them. We don't have power. Or lawyers. We have a paycheck and barely enough food to last the week." Emma stood and walked over, reaching for her mother's hand. "I know. And I'm sorry. But I couldn't watch them do something so wrong and just sweep it up." Sophia didn't answer, but she didn't let go of her daughter's hand either. That night, while Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling, her old phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Emma Carter. This is Daniel Roberts, former finance manager at Harper Enterprises. You were right. We need to talk." Emma's heart thudded. She'd heard the name in passing, Daniel Roberts, the man who had mysteriously disappeared from the company last year. Rumors said he had been fired for mishandling accounts. Others whispered something darker. She replied cautiously. "Why me?" The response came fast. "Because you're the only one brave enough to stop them. And you're not safe." Emma sat up in bed, pulse pounding. Not safe. The warning seemed paranoid, until she remembered Karen Harper's eyes in that boardroom. How cold they had been. How quick the guards had come. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen. Then she typed. "Where?" The next afternoon, Emma met Daniel Roberts at a small cafe on the west end of the city, far from downtown's glass towers. He looked older than she expected, maybe early 40s, with hollow eyes and a nervous energy that made her stomach twist. "You're just a kid," he said, surprised. Emma shrugged. "You messaged me." He nodded and leaned in. "And you're smarter than half the execs at Harper. You saw the clause, didn't you? The one that shifts liability?" Emma nodded. Daniel pulled out a thick manila envelope. "What you found isn't a mistake. It's part of a pattern. They've done this before. 3 companies. 3 bankruptcies. Each time, Harper Enterprises took the fall. Brian Miller walks away rich. And this time, Karen Harper is in on it." Emma's jaw dropped. "You're saying she's helping him sabotage her own husband?" Daniel's smile was bitter. "Karen doesn't care about the company. She cares about control. And Brian gives her what she wants." Emma's breath quickened as Daniel slid the folder across the table. Inside, bank statements, copies of contracts, offshore wire transfers. "Why are you giving this to me?" she asked. Daniel's voice lowered. "Because I tried to go to the board. I tried to warn Thomas Harper myself. But Brian shut me down. And the next day, I was gone. Blacklisted." Emma's hand trembled as she turned the pages. "If you think they'll stop with firing you," Daniel added grimly, "you're wrong. They'll do whatever it takes to protect themselves. Including hurting your mother." Emma's heart sank. "They already did," she whispered. "They suspended her with me." Daniel leaned back. "Then we both know the cost of telling the truth." Emma looked up at him, her voice firm. "I'm not backing down." Daniel gave a slow nod. "Good. Then you need to go further than just speaking up. You need to prove everything. And fast." Emma walked home with the folder held close to her chest like a shield. Inside it was more than evidence. It was a window into a world of greed and manipulation far worse than she had imagined. Back in their apartment, her mother was asleep on the couch, the weight of exhaustion too heavy to fight. Emma sat alone in the kitchen, spreading out the papers. Names. Accounts. Patterns. It all led back to Brian Miller. But something else caught her eye. Karen Harper's signature, not once or twice, but dozens of times across key documents. Authorizing transfers. Signing approvals. Setting dates. Emma's stomach dropped. Karen wasn't just involved. She was orchestrating it. She didn't know what the next move would be. But she knew one thing. She had to find a way to stop them, before they stopped her first. Emma didn't sleep that night. Her mother lay curled on the couch under a threadbare blanket, unaware that just feet away, her daughter was unraveling one of the most dangerous schemes in Chicago's corporate world. The folder Daniel had given her was a treasure trove, and a ticking bomb. As the hours dragged on, Emma highlighted key signatures, flagged suspicious transfers, and built a mental map of Karen and Brian's financial manipulation. It wasn't just shady, it was criminal. There were fraudulent shell companies, forged consulting fees, and massive sums laundered through offshore accounts. But most damning of all were two documents bearing Karen Harper's digital signature, both authorizing backdoor financial movements during the previous merger. At 4:12 a.m., Emma leaned back in her chair and whispered aloud, "Karen's not just complicit. She's the one pulling the strings." Brian Miller had always played the role of the polished enforcer. But Karen? She was something far more dangerous, smart, cold, and willing to burn everything, including her husband, to keep her grip on power. Suddenly, Emma's phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting Daniel. But the number was unknown. The message read, "We know what you're doing. Stop. Or your mother pays the price." Emma's blood ran cold. She rushed to the couch. Her mom was still there, asleep, breathing steadily. She hadn't been touched. Not yet. Emma stared at the text. No name. No trace. Just threat. The next day, she met with Daniel again. This time, they chose a quiet library across the city, away from the Harper building's looming shadow. Emma wore a hood and kept her head down. Daniel looked worse than before, paranoid, twitchy, as if he knew eyes were everywhere. "They threatened my mother," Emma told him quietly. Daniel didn't even blink. "They did the same to me. They're not bluffing." Emma hesitated. "What do we do now?" Daniel pulled out a small black USB stick. "This has the audio files," he said. "Karen and Brian had no idea I was recording them during our last few meetings. You'll hear them admit to the clause, the plan, and even the offshore accounts." Emma took it, holding it like it was radioactive. "Why not go straight to the police?" "I did. No one listened. Brian's got too many friends in high places. Cops, attorneys, maybe even the mayor's office. You need a bigger move." "What kind of move?" "A public one," Daniel said. "Something they can't bury. Something even they can't stop." Emma's mind whirled. She wasn't a journalist or an attorney. But she knew someone who was respected enough to make people listen. Thomas Harper. If she could get the recordings to him, and make him listen, they might have a chance. But even that came with risk. He hadn't stopped the guards last time. Would he protect her now? Or would his loyalty to his wife cloud his judgment? Daniel touched her arm before she left. "Be careful. They're watching." Emma took the USB home, tucked it inside an old envelope, and buried it beneath the floorboard under her bed. That night, she sat across from her mother, trying to act normal over a dinner of instant noodles and crackers. Sophia watched her quietly. "Are you still looking into it?" Emma nodded slowly. It's worse than I thought, Mom. Sophia sighed, brushing her daughter's cheek. Just don't let them crush you, Emma. Whatever happens, you've already made me proud. Emma blinked away sudden tears. The next morning, she put her plan in motion. Wearing her old Harper janitor uniform, she walked through the front doors like she belonged. Past the lobby. Past security. Head down. Invisible. She rode the elevator up to the top floor, then ducked into a hallway near the executive suite. Thomas Harper's office door stood closed. She waited, heart pounding. When it opened, Thomas stepped out. Alone. Emma acted on instinct. Mr. Harper, she said, stepping forward. He blinked, startled. Emma. I need to speak with you. It's about the contract. And your wife. His face stiffened. But he gestured toward his office. Come in. Inside, Thomas moved slowly, like a man carrying too many burdens. Emma handed him the USB. There's a recording on this. Karen and Brian talking about the clause. About sabotaging the merger. About taking everything from Harper Enterprises, and from you. Thomas didn't speak for a long time. He turned the drive over in his hand, jaw tight. I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore, he finally said. You don't have to trust me, Emma replied. Just listen to what's on that drive. A pause. Then, Thomas nodded. I'll call you in 24 hours. Emma left quickly, never turning back. She didn't see the woman standing at the end of the hall, hidden in shadow. Karen Harper. Watching. Later that night, Thomas sat alone in his office with the lights off, the USB plugged into his laptop. He hit play. And for the next 10 minutes, his entire world unraveled. Karen's voice echoed through the room. Thomas is starting to get suspicious. We need to move fast. Brian, he's weak. I've got him wrapped. But that Carter girl, she's a problem. If she keeps digging. Karen, then we deal with her. Permanently. Thomas sat frozen. When the recording ended, he lowered his head into his hands. He had loved Karen for over 2 decades. Shared a life. Built an empire. And she was willing to destroy it all, for what? Money? Power? He stared out the window, heartbreaking. But somewhere beneath the anguish burned a new resolve. He picked up the phone. Victoria Reed, please, he said to the assistant. Tell her Thomas Harper is ready to bring it all down. The next morning, under a slate-gray sky, the city of Chicago stirred like it always had. Taxis honked. Steam rose from sidewalk grates. The towering structure of Harper Enterprises gleamed under diffused sunlight, but within its glass walls, something far more turbulent brewed. Inside a high-rise law office across town, attorney Victoria Reed sat stone-faced, listening to the USB recording for the 3rd time. The moment Karen's voice hissed, we deal with her. Permanently, Victoria snapped the laptop shut. She turned to Thomas Harper, seated across from her with dark circles under his eyes. You're prepared to go public with this? She asked, voice low and serious. Thomas nodded. Whatever it takes. Victoria paused, weighing the consequences. Karen Harper and Brian Miller won't go quietly. Once you expose them, they'll launch every dirty counterattack they have. And if they think that girl, Emma, is the reason you flipped, they'll aim straight for her. Thomas clenched his jaw. Then we'll make sure she's protected. Victoria leaned forward. We need to strike fast. Publicly. Press conference, national coverage. And Emma, she'll need to testify. She's the one who uncovered the clause. Thomas sighed. She's just a kid. She's the reason you still have a company, Victoria said. And the reason you didn't sign away your legacy. Don't underestimate her again. Later that afternoon, in a small apartment on the south side, Emma and her mother were folding laundry in silence when the knock came at the door. Emma opened it slowly, and froze. Thomas Harper stood there, alone. "I owe you an apology," he said. Sophia appeared behind her, stunned speechless. Thomas stepped inside, hat in hand. He didn't look like a CEO today, just a tired man who'd had everything pulled from under him. "I heard the recording," he told Emma quietly. "You were right. About all of it. Karen. Brian. The claws." Emma said nothing. Thomas turned to Sophia. "You both were punished for telling the truth. That ends now." Sophia crossed her arms. "With all due respect, Mr. Harper, our lives don't go back to normal because you say sorry." Thomas nodded solemnly. "No. But I'd like to make things right." He pulled a manila envelope from his coat. Inside, a reinstatement letter for Sophia, with full back pay, and a personal scholarship offer for Emma. "Harper Enterprises will cover your education, wherever you want to go," he said. "You deserve more than scrubbing floors." Emma's eyes welled, but she kept her voice even. "What happens to Karen and Brian?" "I'm going public. Press conference. Legal charges." "But I'll need your help," Thomas said. "Your voice. Your story." Emma hesitated. Her gaze flicked to her mother, who looked away, worried. Then she said quietly, "I'll do it. But not for your company. For the truth." The next morning, the front plaza of Harper Enterprises was packed with media. Cameras flashed. Reporters buzzed. A podium stood at the center, a Harper Enterprises banner behind it. At exactly 9 a.m., Thomas Harper stepped forward, flanked by Victoria Reed and Emma Carter. He spoke with calm, measured gravity. "I've built this company for 25 years. I've made good decisions. And bad ones. But none as damaging as the blind trust one placed in the people closest to me." Reporters murmured. "My wife, Karen Harper, and my business partner, Brian Miller, conspired to insert a clause in our most recent merger contract, one that would have destroyed this company and left it liable for billions in damages." Gasps rippled through the crowd. But they didn't count on one thing. A 16-year-old girl named Emma Carter. A janitor's daughter. Who read what none of us did, and had the courage to speak up when no one else would. He turned to Emma. She stepped forward to the mic. "I'm not special," Emma said. "I'm not powerful. I'm just someone who saw something wrong and chose not to stay quiet." Cameras clicked. "But what I learned is this: telling the truth isn't easy. It cost me my job. It cost my mom her job. It got us threatened. Watched. Followed. But I'd do it again. Because the truth matters, even when you're the only one who sees it." The crowd erupted into applause. But far above them, in the penthouse office that once belonged to Thomas, Karen Harper watched from behind tinted glass. Her eyes narrowed as she turned to Brian Miller. "She's going to ruin us." Brian poured himself a drink, unbothered. "Then it's time we fight back." Later that evening, social media exploded with headlines. CEO's wife accused in fraud plot, teenage janitor uncovers conspiracy. Emma Carter, the girl who stopped a billion-dollar trap. But just as quickly, the smear campaign began. Fake profiles attacked Emma's character. Rumors swirled. News outlets sympathetic to Karen's inner circle released manipulated photos and twisted interviews. Thomas received an urgent call from Victoria. Karen and Brian hired a PR firm, she warned. They're going to paint Emma as an opportunist. A plant. Maybe even claim you're sleeping with her. Thomas slammed his hand on the desk. No more games. They're playing for keeps now, Victoria said. We need something bigger. Emma sat in the back office of Victoria's firm, her eyes scanning the online vitriol against her. She felt sick. Not because she feared for herself, but because the people she loved could get dragged through the dirt. Her mother. Daniel. Even Thomas. Just then, Victoria entered. "Emma," she said quietly. "We need to talk about the recordings." Emma blinked. "What about them?" Victoria pulled out a smaller USB. "Daniel gave me another one. This one's worse." She clicked play. Brian's voice crackled through the speaker. "If Thomas finds out, we blame him. We've already forged the documents. He'll look guilty. He'll take the fall. Then Karen. And the girl. No one will care about a janitor's daughter once her record gets smeared. We'll bury her. Legally or otherwise." Emma swallowed hard. "They're going to destroy everything." Victoria nodded slowly. "Unless we destroy their plan first." Outside the law office, a dark sedan idled. Inside it, a man in a black coat picked up his phone. "She's got the second recording," he said. "They'll use it. You want me to intercept?" A cold female voice answered on the other end. "No. Let them try. Just make sure the girl never makes it to court." The next few days were a blur of headlines, strategy meetings, and whispered warnings. Emma had gone from invisible to infamous overnight. The brave girl who stood up against corruption had now become a target. Everywhere she turned, she could feel eyes watching, some filled with admiration, others with malice. Thomas Harper worked around the clock, preparing to bring formal charges against Karen and Brian with Victoria's legal team. But as their strategy solidified, so did the danger. The enemy wasn't retreating. One afternoon, as Emma and her mother walked home from the grocery store, bags in hand and heads down, they noticed a black car idling by the curb. Not a movement. No tinted windows rolled down. Just presence. Silent. Menacing. Sophia gripped Emma's wrist tighter. "Don't look. Just walk." Inside their apartment, Emma locked every bolt and sat by the door with a kitchen knife. Her heart wouldn't stop racing. This wasn't paranoia anymore. The threats were real. But even fear couldn't shake her resolve. She opened her notebook and pressed play on the second recording Victoria had given her. Brian and Karen's voices sliced through the speaker again, sharper this time. "Karen, you know what I think? We need to take her off the chessboard altogether. Just one slip-up. Something small. We plant it. A stolen item. A drug packet. Anything. The system will do the rest." Brian, already working on it. Emma's stomach turned. She had heard enough. The next morning, Emma walked into Victoria Reed's office with the recordings, her notes, and a fire in her voice. "Let's go public with everything," she said. "Not just what they did to Harper Enterprises. What they're doing to me." Victoria looked at her, concerned. "You know, once this goes live, there's no hiding. You'll be attacked harder than ever." Emma's voice didn't waver. "They already tried to ruin my name. Now I'll give them a real reason to be afraid of it." Victoria smiled slightly. "Then we'll do it right." That evening, the story aired on 60 Minutes. Victoria coordinated the release. Thomas Harper sat beside Emma. They didn't hide behind press releases or lawyers this time, they faced the camera head-on. Emma's story unfolded in full color, how she found the clause, how she was dragged out of the boardroom, how she and her mother were suspended. How the threat started. How Brian and Karen plotted to use Harper Enterprises as a shell for liability. And now, how they were planning to smear a 16-year-old girl to protect themselves. The reaction was immediate. Public opinion, once cautious, turned white-hot in Emma's favor. The hashtag Emma exposed the truth began trending nationwide. Within hours, Emma received messages from students, teachers, even members of Congress, offering support. But she also received a different kind of message. One evening, her phone buzzed with a photo. Her mother. Standing outside the local pharmacy. Unaware she was being watched. Then a message below. Next time, she doesn't come home. Emma froze. Her hands shook. She ran to her mother's room. Sophia was there, folding laundry like nothing had happened. Emma hugged her tightly, whispering, "We need to leave. Now." Victoria helped them move into a secure apartment under temporary legal protection. She called in favors, fast-tracked paperwork. Police were notified. But deep down, they all knew, Karen and Brian weren't just going to sit and wait for justice. They were planning something big. And it came the next day. Thomas Harper walked into his office to find 2 federal agents waiting. A warrant was presented. His accounts frozen. Charges listed. Insider trading. Tax fraud. Corporate embezzlement. "Impossible," he whispered. One agent looked him dead in the eye. "Anonymous whistleblower. Everything traces back to your name, sir." Thomas's world spun. He picked up the phone and called Victoria, his voice hoarse. "They did it. Karen and Brian planted everything. They're pinning it all on me." Victoria, calm as ever, said, "Then it's time to drop the hammer." Later that night, Emma sat in a secret conference room with Victoria, Thomas, and Daniel Roberts. Papers spread across the table. USB drives plugged in. A clear plan formed. Emma leaned forward. "We need to take it to the courthouse. Not a press room. A judge." Victoria nodded. "Agreed. But we'll need you to testify, Emma. Not just about the clause. About the threats. About the second recording." "I will," Emma said without hesitation. But across the city, Karen Harper received a different kind of message. Her informant inside the courthouse had delivered an update. Emma Carter was scheduled to testify next week. Karen crushed her wine glass in her fist. "She makes it to that courtroom over my dead body." Brian, lounging on the couch, replied coldly, "No. Over hers." That same night, Emma awoke with a jolt to the sound of breaking glass. A figure in black had just slipped into their temporary apartment through the kitchen window. Emma rolled to the floor, grabbing her phone. Her mother screamed. A man charged down the hallway, face covered, gloved hands reaching. Emma ducked and slammed the bedroom door, locking it. With shaking hands, she hit the emergency line Victoria had given her. Within 3 minutes, 2 plainclothes security agents burst in from the hallway, guns drawn. The intruder vanished through the back. Sophia was unharmed. But Emma? Emma was done being afraid. She looked at Victoria the next morning and said, "They sent someone into our home." Victoria placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then let's bring this to court. Let's end it." Sunlight filtered through the windows of the downtown courthouse, casting golden beams over the polished wood floors and high marble columns. The energy in the building buzzed like static. Outside, news vans lined the street. Inside, photographers and reporters gathered in hushed clusters, waiting for what had quickly become the trial of the decade. The state of Illinois versus Karen Harper and Brian Miller. Seated quietly on a bench near the front of the courtroom, Emma Carter clutched her notes with trembling hands. She wore a simple navy blouse, her braids tied back neatly. Beside her sat her mother, Sophia, holding her hand tightly. "You don't have to do this, baby," Sophia whispered. "We could walk away. Today. Now." Emma shook her head. "Then they win. Again." Across the aisle sat Karen Harper, composed as ever in a tailored charcoal suit, her blonde bob pristine, her eyes cold as glass. Brian Miller, still exuding quiet arrogance, leaned back in his chair like this was a business negotiation, not a criminal trial. They didn't look worried. They should have. The courtroom doors opened again. Thomas Harper entered, flanked by attorney Victoria Reed. Whispers erupted as cameras snapped. Thomas didn't glance at his wife. Not once. He sat beside Emma instead, nodding at her with quiet respect. Then the judge entered. All rise. The trial began. The state prosecutor wasted no time, outlining the conspiracy, the fraudulent clause in the merger contract, the embezzlement, the offshore accounts, the threats against Emma and her mother, the planted evidence against Thomas. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as the web of betrayal unraveled, thread by thread. When Emma was called to the stand, the room went deathly still. She stood, walked with steady steps to the witness box, and swore her oath. From the corner of her eye, she saw Karen smirking slightly, arms crossed. Brian didn't even look at her. Miss Carter, the prosecutor began, you were employed as a janitor at Harper Enterprises, is that correct? Yes. And on what day did you first read the merger document? 3 days before the scheduled signing. I was finishing my shift and saw it left on the conference table. You weren't authorized to view it, were you? No, Emma said honestly. But when I saw it open, I couldn't ignore what I read. She went on to describe Clause 14, Section C, how it transferred all legal liability to Harper Enterprises while shielding Brian's firm from accountability. She spoke about the warning she gave Thomas, the moment she was dragged out by security, and how she and her mother were suspended. And did anyone threaten you afterward? Emma nodded, her voice tightening. Yes. I received texts. Photos of my mother. Messages saying if I didn't stop, they'd hurt her. The courtroom gasped. And who do you believe sent those threats? Emma's gaze didn't waver as she turned toward the defense table. Karen Harper and Brian Miller. Karen visibly stiffened. Brian's jaw twitched. The prosecutor stepped aside. Then the defense attorney, Jonathan Clark, approached. He was sharp-suited, razor-voiced, and deadly smooth. Miss Carter, he began, do you expect the court to believe that a 16-year-old girl with no legal background understood complex contractual language better than experienced executives and lawyers? I didn't need a law degree to recognize deception, Emma replied coolly. I just needed to read the words. Isn't it true that you've become quite famous since this incident? Clark pressed. Interviews, news coverage. Do you enjoy the spotlight? Emma's voice didn't shake. I didn't ask for the spotlight. I asked them not to lie. Murmurs of approval rippled through the gallery. Isn't it also true, Clark added, that you were promised a full-ride scholarship in return for your cooperation? Emma paused. That was after everything happened. I stood up when I had no promises. No safety. No reward. Clark tried again. And what about these recordings? How do we know they aren't fake? Victoria Reed stood. Objection. The recordings have been authenticated by digital forensic experts. Sustained, the judge said. Clark retreated, lips thin with frustration. Emma was dismissed from the stand. As she returned to her seat, Thomas leaned over. You were extraordinary, he whispered. Emma allowed herself a tiny smile. Next, Thomas Harper took the stand. He didn't hold back. He spoke of trust betrayed, of financial trails he personally verified, and of the moment he overheard Karen and Brian plotting in his own garden. Karen is my wife, he said, voice low. But she was willing to destroy my company, and my life. And she would have succeeded if not for a 16-year-old who refused to be silenced. Then came the recordings. Karen and Brian's voices echoed across the courtroom. We'll pin it on Thomas. The board will believe us. That Carter girl. She'll be forgotten within a week. If she testifies, we bury her. Publicly. Or privately. You could hear a pin drop. Karen's mask cracked. Her eyes darted wildly. Brian turned pale. When court recessed, cameras flooded the hallway. Reporters screamed questions. The public was already making up its mind. That night, Emma and Sophia returned to their secure apartment, exhausted but hopeful. Sophia made tea. "You did it, sweetheart. Win or lose, you did it." Emma sat at the window, looking out at the lights of the city. "We're not done yet." Across town, in a hotel room under a fake name, Karen Harper paced in panic. "We're losing," she hissed. "It's slipping away." Brian sipped whiskey, trying to maintain calm. "We've still got cards to play." Karen spun on him. "You were supposed to control this. You were the one who kept saying Thomas wouldn't betray you," Brian snapped. "Well, he did. And now that kid, Emma, is about to bring us down." Karen's hands shook. But it was too late. The evidence was out. The recordings were real. The truth was a wildfire. And there was only one day left before the verdict. The final day of the trial arrived with a silence heavier than any storm. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered. Supporters held signs that read, "Truth has no age," and "Justice for Emma." News crews jockeyed for position, anticipating what would surely be one of the most talked-about verdicts in modern corporate history. Inside, the air was tight with anticipation. Emma sat in the gallery beside her mother, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the judge's bench. Thomas Harper and Victoria Reed sat nearby, somber and resolute. Across the room, Karen Harper and Brian Miller were no longer the untouchable elites they had once appeared to be. Brian's designer suit hung loose on him, his once confident gaze now hollow. Karen's face was drained of its usual color, her fingers twitching beneath the table. Everyone in that courtroom knew, whatever was coming next, it would change everything. "All rise." Judge Marianne Culver took her seat, her face unreadable. She glanced at the jury foreperson. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "A beat." "Then." "We have, Your Honor." Emma held her breath. In the matter of Karen Harper and Brian Miller, on the charge of conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, we find the defendants guilty. Murmurs erupted in the gallery. On the charge of embezzlement of corporate funds, guilty. Emma felt her mother's grip tighten around her hand. On the charge of attempted witness intimidation, guilty. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Karen collapsed into her chair, eyes wide in disbelief. Brian stared straight ahead, expression frozen, lips moving silently, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a curse. Judge Culver's gavel slammed once. "Order." She looked directly at Karen and Brian. "This court finds both defendants responsible for deliberate and malicious actions that not only violated the law, but endangered lives and manipulated justice for personal gain. You abused power, and you nearly got away with it." Karen blinked, jaw trembling. Brian slumped back, sweat beading on his forehead. "For these crimes," Judge Culver continued, "this court sentences both defendants to 10 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. Furthermore, all assets tied to the fraudulent merger and offshore accounts will be seized and returned to Harper Enterprises for restitution." Gasps. Applause. Then a swell of relief. Karen stood suddenly, her voice shrill. "This is insane. I was protecting my family. This little girl, she ruined everything." All eyes turned to Emma, who stood slowly, unshaken. "No, Mrs. Harper," she said calmly. "You did." The guard stepped forward, placing cuffs on Karen and Brian. Brian muttered something under his breath, no one cared. As they were led away, Karen turned back one last time. "You think you've won, Emma Carter? You think this makes you better than us?" Emma met her eyes with steady, quiet defiance. "No. Just braver." With that, Karen was gone. The courtroom erupted in applause, not for a CEO, not for a company, but for the young girl who had risked everything for the truth. Emma stepped outside into the sunlight, greeted by a sea of cheering strangers. Reporters called her name. Flashbulbs fired like fireworks. But through it all, she kept her eyes on her mother. Sophia's tears of pride were all that mattered. Later that week, Harper Enterprises held a press conference not to repair its image, but to honor it. Thomas Harper stood at a sleek podium in the company atrium, flanked by new leadership, employees, and dozens of cameras. Today, we begin a new chapter, one built on integrity, transparency, and courage. And none of that would be possible without the actions of one remarkable young woman. He gestured to Emma, who stood at the edge of the crowd, eyes wide with disbelief. I am proud to announce that Harper Enterprises will fund Emma Carter's full academic journey, wherever she chooses to go, including Harvard, Yale, or anywhere she dares to dream. The room erupted into applause. Emma stepped forward, face flushed with emotion. She took the mic, her voice small but unwavering. I never expected any of this. I just did what I thought was right. And I want everyone watching this to know, you don't need power to tell the truth. You just need courage. Even if your shoes are dirty and your hands are tired, your voice still matters. The applause swelled. Phones flashed. Tears fell. That night, as the city glowed in amber streetlight, Emma stood by her window in the apartment she and her mother would soon leave for a better life. She thought about the long nights, the threats, the fear, and the justice that had finally come. Behind her, Sophia wrapped her in a hug. You changed everything, she whispered. Emma smiled softly. No. I just refused to be silent. Months later, Emma walked through the ivy-covered campus of Harvard University, her books clutched to her chest, her eyes scanning a future that once seemed impossible. Students greeted her like any other freshman, but a few whispered as she passed. She's the one, they'd say. The girl who stopped the billion-dollar fraud. But to Emma, none of it was about fame. It was about one moment, one choice, to step into a room where she didn't belong, and speak words no one wanted to hear. And in doing so, she proved that truth, however small it begins, can echo louder than any lie. Emma Carter's story reminds us that doing the right thing doesn't depend on your status, your title, or your age. It only takes courage. As Thomas Harper said, she wasn't the voice of power. She was the voice of truth. What would you have done in her place? Tell us in the comments below. And if Emma's courage inspired you, like and share this video to remind others, the smallest voice can shake the tallest tower. Subscribe to True Echo for more stories that prove integrity always echoes the loudest.